Hello and welcome to another Trip Hacks DC special spring live stream. My name is Rob. I am the founder of Trip Hacks DC. Welcome to everyone who is joining me here today. It is Saturday, March 27th, 2021, and today's live stream is an early look at some of the cherry trees near the Washington Monument. And I chose this location because this is where there are typically some of the early bloomers. And I was out here earlier, and I can promise you that there are definitely some early bloomers, including, you can see right over my shoulder, right here. So I'll take you around the Washington Monument, we'll check them out, we'll see it up close. It's a little noisy out here today, so hopefully everyone can hear. If you are tuned in from somewhere around the world, leave a chat and let me know where you are joining from, and I'll be able to say hello. So let me know where you're joining me from, and also what the weather is like in your part of the world today. It is quite a nice day here in Washington, D.C., which is why I think you will see there are a lot of people out and about. Yoshi Elevators, hello. Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while, Yoshi. Let me know if you are enjoying your Trip Hacks DC t-shirts. Gaddy from Dallas, Texas, where it is nice and sunny. Jason, hello, welcome. Topolino is tuned in from Tel Aviv, where it is currently 11 p.m. and I do appreciate that you're staying up late in Tel Aviv to join me on this live stream. Angie's Travels from North Carolina, welcome. Tyler from Minnesota, rainy all day. That is quite a bummer. Krista from Orlando, 85 and sunny. Jerry from Finland, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Yoshi Elevator's wearing the Trip Hacks DC shirt right now. Ludin from California and Dale from Chicago. Well, today in Washington, D.C., it is in the 60s. It is partly cloudy, I would say. The Capital Weather Gang and the Washington Post rated today a 9 out of 10. I believe the person who did today's forecast said that it's only a 9 out of 10 because there's a lot of pollen, and if you're like me and have allergies, that is a bummer. Amy, sunny in Sacramento. Ludin, also from California. I'm glad that the West Coasters are able to join in today. I usually do these on Sunday mornings, which I realize is 7 a.m. in California. Simon, glad to have you join me here today. And let's see. Kathy's joining too. And yes, I am in front of the African American History and Culture Museum. I started over here today because it's one of the relatively quiet spots right now. As I get across the street, you will see a lot of people picnicking and out and about today. I needed to start somewhere quiet, and also wanted to make sure that I had a good signal. With this many people out and about, I'm always a little worried about having a good cell signal, so we'll see. Arian from San Francisco. Christian from Flushing, Queens. Can't wait to come back to DC. Can't wait to have everyone from New York back in DC. And yes, Simon, pangs of missing on the National Mall. Vivian, also from New York City. And Ludin asks, when is full bloom? That is an excellent question. The official peak bloom is still predicted to be April 2nd through the 5th. I checked that on the official National Cherry Blossom website before I left my home. However, based on what the trees near the Washington Monument look like today, my guess is that it will probably be in 2 or 3 days. So I guess that would be Monday or Tuesday, which really goes to show, I tell people every single year, it is notoriously difficult to predict peak bloom. And this is a perfect example of why. Even though they'd predicted April 2nd through 5th for an entire month now, it looks like they're going to miss it by a few days. And Gaddy asks, is this the busiest DC has been in a while? The answer to that is definitely yes. More people out and about today than I have seen in a long while. Bob Ross, hello. Where are you joining me from, Bob? Let everyone know where you are tuned in from. So I'm going to depart from my perch here at the African American History and Culture Museum and head across the street to the Washington Monument. I was out this morning. I went to the Smithsonian Castle to see the magnolia trees, and someone spotted me, and I was doing an audio recording, and I feel really bad because I tried to find you after I was done to chat, and you were already gone. So if you saw me this morning at about 8:30 and you thought I was blowing you off, I was not. I tried to find you, but I couldn't, so let me know if that was you. I also tweeted about it, but no one responded to my tweet. So the mystery man is still out there. Jason, hello from Maryland. And yes, it would be great to be in DC for a full bloom. I think that's probably about 2 to 3 days away. And Joyce from Indiana, happy to show the blossoms. The Saturday of peak bloom is historically the single busiest day in Washington, D.C. So my hunch is that this is about as busy as you're going to see it this spring. Yoshi, you're asking how's DC right now? Well, I'm showing you, so hopefully you'll be able to get a good sense of how things are from this live stream. Now, there are about a dozen different varieties of cherry trees in Washington, D.C. The most common variety is called the Yoshino cherry, and that is the one that is mostly found around the tidal basin. There's a few of the Yoshinos over here as well. But as I walk past these, you'll see that they don't all look exactly the same. Some of the blossoms are whiter, some are pinker. You've got single blossoms, double blossoms. And what I did was I actually put a link in the description if anyone is up for it. In the description is a link to a map that shows every cherry tree in Washington, D.C. So as I'm walking past these, if you have the map pulled up, you'll be able to see exactly what type of cherry tree it is. What variety of cherry tree it is, I mean. Vivian says that she saw an albino squirrel near the White House in a park a couple of years ago. I bet I know which park you're talking about too, Vivian. It's probably the Franklin Square Park. By the way, in case anyone is curious, this is the restroom line. Not a line I would want to be in right now. So it's a good thing that I drank my coffee earlier this morning. Chad asks, when are the Smithsonian's opening up? No idea. No idea. So this building that everyone is waiting in line to use the restroom, in the before times, this is also where you would go to get your ticket to go to the top of the Washington Monument. So they would have some tickets that were reserved online, and then for everybody else who either didn't know or forgot or ran out of time, you could go and walk up to this building first thing in the morning and get your ticket. My hunch is that that system will go away and it will be all advance reservations only from now on. So of course we have the Washington Monument here. Now this weekend historically would have been the weekend of the Kite Festival, where everybody would bring their kites and there would be professional kite flyers and everyone would be flying their kites here at the Washington Monument. I can see a kite off in the distance over here. I can see one over there, but that is it. Not a whole lot of kites this year. They did encourage people to fly kites back home and to post their kite flying on social media. Yoshi asks, is Arlington Cemetery open yet? Some of the sites are open. You have to go on the Arlington Cemetery website to see exactly what is and is not currently open. But you can go onto the grounds. You can see some of the sites. If you have a family member who's buried there, you can visit them as well. Jason asks, when will the Washington Monument reopen? Again, don't know the answer to that. Basically, nothing has a reopening date yet. The Washington Monument, my guess is, will probably be one of the last things to reopen. Now, I'm all for keeping all the outdoor sites open, I think. If it's outdoors, it should be open, but to get to the top of the Washington Monument, you have to cram into an elevator, and I think that's a bit dicey. If you want to go all the way up to the top, you've got to get into that elevator, and so I would not be surprised if that is one of the last things that reopens. Hello, Jason from Coventry, England. And yes, Amy says the Washington Monument was closed when she visited 2 years ago. The Washington Monument has a history of being closed for many different reasons. In 2011, we had an earthquake, so we had earthquake damage to repair. They repaired that, and then we had some more damage that they had to repair. They did a massive elevator project where they redid the entire elevator a few years back. That took a while. And then when they were finally finished with the elevator project, they discovered some problems with the soil that they had to take care of. Not sure the details, but. Chad says, do I think there will be student travel to DC this summer? Yes, I do. I happen to have heard that there are student groups who are booked. Surprising to me, but I've heard that they're doing it. So probably not as many as in the past, but more than zero for sure. So it is quite a nice weather day here. About 65 degrees if I had to guess. Right in between shorts weather and a little bit warmer clothes weather. Yoshi says, went to the Washington Monument when you came in February 2020. That would have been one of the last elevator trips before it closed due to COVID. Alex tuned in from Rome, where they have a small cherry blossom and an avenue of cherry trees. That sounds awesome. Is it popular like it is here, Alex? I'm curious. So the cool thing about the cherry trees at the Washington Monument is that they're pretty close together to each other, so you don't have to travel a long distance to see them all, and they bloom early. Now, I don't know if this is considered fully bloomed or not. There are 6 stages of a cherry blossom bloom, and once you reach stage 6, then it is considered fully open. Now, I know that the cherry trees on the tidal basin are currently in stage 5 out of 6. And my hunch would be to say that these trees here by the Washington Monument are probably at least a 5, if not already at a 6. American Deshi asks, still full bloom until next Sunday? Don't know. Everything depends on the weather. Everything depends on the weather. If, for example, it's really warm the next 2 days and then they come into full bloom, and then there's a giant windstorm later in the week that knocks them all down, then by next Sunday they could be gone. So that is why I think everybody is out today to see these, because by next weekend they could be done. Not saying they will. If we have good weather, they could last for up to 10 days. But this is Washington, D.C. We rarely have ideal weather. Alex says in Rome, it is not like in D.C., but there are a few people. That's pretty cool. I did not know about the cherry trees in Rome, but I suspect that they have made it to many corners of the world by now. Our cherry trees have been here for a little over 100 years. And Stephanie did not get to see the cherry blossoms last time. What time of year were you in DC, Stephanie? I'm curious. Simon says, Kathy is a librarian, loves old libraries and bookshops. What do I recommend? Well, of course, the Library of Congress. One of the most, if not the most, underrated building in the entire city. Can't imagine that a librarian would not absolutely love it. Bookshops, unfortunately, we have fewer bookshops than we used to, at least, good independent bookshops. But there are still a few that are left. You can go to Kramer Books in DuPont Circle, which is a hybrid bookstore and coffee shop and restaurant. You can go to a bookstore on Capitol Hill on Pennsylvania Avenue, which the name is escaping me at the moment. I feel bad. But it is on Pennsylvania Avenue near the Eastern Market Metro. And also nearby, Capitol Hill Books, one of the, I don't know if I want to say famous or infamous bookstores in DC. The owner was very eccentric before he sold the store to his employees, but many of the eccentricities still remain. Amy says she missed the full bloom 2 years ago. Yeah, it's very hard to catch the full bloom. Even if you plan a trip for the spring, you have to get the timing exactly right, which basically means being extremely lucky. And Gary says, saw a video about the cherry trees in Vancouver. Japan donated to them as well. I suspect Japan probably donated cherry trees to most of the places in the world outside of Japan that have cherry trees. Now, if you're curious about the history of these, last year I did do a video about the history of the cherry blossoms, and unfortunately this was right as COVID was starting, and I didn't want to have to make this video. I wanted to do a real video about the cherry blossoms walking around just like this, but at the time we didn't know what was going on. There was a lot of uncertainty, so I basically made it from my home, and all the information's good. I think that all of the information, the history, it's all good. But people hated the video. It has the most dislikes of any video, I think, on the channel. And it's because people didn't want to see me sitting on my couch talking about cherry blossoms. They wanted to be out and about like this. But if you want to know the history, highly recommend that one. Okay, let's see. Alex says, splendid event. Will I go to the Jefferson Memorial? Not today, not planning on it, Alex. My plan is to go next Saturday, probably next Saturday, if the cherry blossoms are still up. I will do the tidal basin next Saturday. Unfortunately, for the West Coasters, it'll probably be pretty early because you've got to get there early to avoid the crowds like this. So, but if you're in Italy, that should be mid-afternoon for you, so hopefully that should work out just fine. Amy says, missed the blossoms in bloom 2 years ago, but went to Germantown, Maryland, and they were still in bloom. That's the cool thing about the cherry blossoms is because you have so many different varieties, and they all bloom at different times, that if you miss one, if you're late for one, you might not be late for another. If you're too early for one, you might not be too early for another. And so you can check out different spots. And if anyone has opened up that map that I put down in the description yet, you'll be able to see there are about a dozen different varieties of cherry trees. And they're not just here. They're all over the city. And in fact, what's interesting to me is that the biggest cherry blossom hole is actually right over here, the National Mall area. Of course, the tidal basin has a ton of them, but then on this side of Independence Avenue, basically from the Lincoln Memorial to the Washington Monument, aside from these, there aren't any cherry trees. Simon says, in my opinion, the DC blooms are better than those in Tokyo. Those are fighting words, Simon. I think people would debate that one thoroughly. Stephanie says, unfortunately missed them by a week. Yeah. If you're unlucky, for example, this year they've said peak bloom was predicted to be April 2nd through the 5th. So if you planned a trip for the 2nd through the 5th, you might still miss them because it's looking like they're going to be a little bit earlier. They haven't adjusted the official prediction yet, though. Chad says, DC looks back to normal. Not really. I mean, lots of people are out and about, but most indoor sites are still closed, so certainly does not feel back to normal to me. Mosaic Crane says, sister, who lives in DC, just walked through the front door. Well, your sister is missing out on the best time of year, so that's a bummer. Unless you have cherry blossoms near you, in which case it's okay. Now here's a great example of the varieties of cherry trees. Now this one right here, hopefully you can see on screen. I'm not sure how good my quality is today, how strong my signal is, but this is a very pink blossom, and you can see it does not really have distinct petals at all. They're all kind of really close together like that. And then you go to this one right next to it, and this one is a very white blossom, and it has a little bit more distinct petals, but still they're fairly compact. And then you go to this one right here, and this one is still in the early bud phase. So this one's still got some time to go before it is fully open. But you can get a sense of what it's going to look like. A few of them over here are starting to open. These look like they are the pink variety blossom. So just because it's a cherry tree does not mean that they all look the same. The different varieties all look a little bit different. So Simon says, the tidal basin is awash with blossoms, but I hear they're limiting numbers. They announced on WTOP they may start banning visits if the numbers get too high. So it is a bit frustrating, I will admit. The information is not very good. I have no inside information. Anyone who works in the tour industry has no inside information. All we know is that if the tidal basin gets too crowded and it's unsafe, then they will close it down. But they didn't say how crowded it has to be before they would call it unsafe. So it's all a big mystery to all of us, and makes it very difficult to operate a tour business, because on the normal trail, FDR Memorial and MLK Memorial are all part of the tour, and those are all part of the area that is considered part of the tidal basin. Yoshi asks, is the Spy Museum open yet? Yes, it is. It is open. You can purchase a ticket on the website. You do need a ticket to go. Jason says, isn't that why Smithsonian closed? Not sure what that refers to in that question. Here's a tree that is not blooming yet. This one's not very far along as it progresses towards a bloom. This one is the dark, the deep pink, I don't want to say red, it's not really red. This is the deeper pink color of blossom, so there is a little bit of everything. Okay, Jason said, I mentioned the COVID numbers rising. Yes, so COVID is certainly not over. And Smithsonian has always taken a very conservative approach when it comes to reopening. Smithsonian, when they reopened last summer and fall, I don't think they ever reopened every museum. I believe the Natural History Museum never reopened. The American History Museum did reopen, and some of the smaller museums reopened. I believe the African American History and Culture Museum reopened. I can't remember if the Portrait Gallery did or not. But basically, when Smithsonian reopened their museums last summer and fall, they did them kind of one at a time, and they didn't give much advance notice. So it might have been on Friday, they'd make an announcement and they'd say, on Monday, the American History Museum is going to reopen, which is fine, good news. It's going to open soon, but also makes it kind of impossible to plan. If the American History Museum was a deal breaker for you, if you weren't going to come unless it was open, makes it difficult to know if you should come or not to plan your trip. And yes, Air and Space Museum did not reopen, but that one is not surprising because the Air and Space Museum on the National Mall is under a massive, massive multi-year renovation. And so even if it did reopen, it would have been limited just by the construction work that they're doing. Now that's going to be awesome when it does fully reopen from the renovation, and I do kind of wonder if being close to the public has given them a chance to get the renovation done faster. I don't know for sure, but I would be curious to know if anyone works there and has any insight. All right, Alex says vaccination campaign in DC, how it goes. I think it is different in all parts of the US. I have not gotten to my turn yet to take it, unfortunately for me. And cherry blossom around Tidal Basin in bloom yet. They are at stage 5 out of 6. So there are 6 stages to bloom. Around the Tidal Basin, they are currently in stage 5, which means we're probably only about 2 or 3 days away from a full bloom. So if you have a trip to DC on April 2 through 4, you might be okay, or you might be too late. It just depends on the weather this week. So these are very delicate flowers, and what happens is, once they're in full bloom, they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable to the weather. If it rains, it could knock them down. If it's windy, it could blow them off. And so, in a perfect scenario, they would go into full bloom, and then we would have beautiful 70-degree weather with no rain and no wind for the next 2 weeks, and they would look beautiful for, weeks. But this is Washington, D.C., so that is not going to be the case. And the big question is, what's the weather going to be like in between the time that they go into full bloom and next weekend? We will just have to wait and see. Now, the other thing is, go down in the video description and look at that map of every cherry tree in Washington, D.C. If you're too late for some of them, you might not be too late for others. So just because you don't get to see the world-famous Tidal Basin cherry trees does not mean that you can't see any trees in bloom. And that is one of the cool things about it. Okay, Mosaic Crone says she lives close enough, but fled all the people this weekend. Yes, it is such a nice day that there are a lot of people out and about picnicking and such today. Dave Wheeler, first time on a live, long time watcher. Thanks for tuning in, Dave. Where are you tuned in from? I'm curious. And if you tuned in after I asked in the first 5 minutes, and you haven't let me know where you're tuned in from in the world, let me know where you are and what the weather is like where you live. It sounds like in most parts of the world today, where everyone is tuned in, the weather is quite nice. So hopefully you're watching this on your phone while enjoying a picnic. I know in Europe it's already getting quite late. Bobby Planzer, hello, good to have you. Here's another one of the trees that has not bloomed yet. This is the deeper pink. Can you see? Not quite sure how good the signal is here, but this is a deeper pink flower than some of the other cherry trees that are around. And around here on the Washington Monument grounds, they kind of are in little patches here. So if you can see that little patch over there that I just walked through, that's the whiter color cherry blossom. The one that I did earlier back there, that's the pink one. And then we've got some of these that are not quite in bloom yet. Dave, Central Coast of California, 65 and sunny. I wouldn't expect anything else from the coast of California. And Mosaic Crone, Eastern Shore, same weather that we have here. It is a bit breezy today, not too bad, but I am a bit surprised at how breezy it is out here. This tree here has some of the flowers open, some of them still in bud form. So this one probably still needs a few more days to fully bloom. Now when the blossoms fall down, depends how windy it is. If they fall down from rain, they'll all kind of fall straight down and land right under the tree. If they fall down from wind, they'll blow all over the place, as you can imagine. But there are some really interesting photos I've seen of a photographer who got a chance to come out immediately after they fell, and it looks like there's snow all over the ground because, especially under the ones with the white petals, they fall down and it looks like the ground is covered in snow. Kind of cool. 8:25 in Coventry, UK. Do you have a daylight savings in the UK? I'm curious to know. We had a daylight savings time change here a few weeks ago. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Can't remember. So it is 4:27 in Washington, D.C. right now. And I always thought that the UK was 5 hours off from us, but maybe it's only 4 hours in the summer. Stephanie, Kentucky, 73. That is awfully nice. Hopefully not too humid in Kentucky. Sean, Donna, we are planning to visit next week Thursday from Chicago. Is it worth the drive? My general advice is that it is not worth traveling from out of town right now. Too much is still closed. You're much better saving your trip for closer to summer when things will be reopened. If you live nearby, I'd say go ahead, go for it, especially if you can, make it a day trip or something. But in general, I don't think it's worth coming from out of town until more of the sites have reopened. Jason Stewart, our clocks go forward tonight/tomorrow morning. That's interesting. It's not on the same date that we do it. I find that rather interesting. Eddie Saunders, good to see you. Welcome to the live stream. I know you said you were watching another one of these earlier and were surprised at the progress of the cherry trees. So the UK goes back to 5 hours different from us tonight. So I guess for 1 week of the year, maybe another week in the fall, it's not 5 hours off. I find that quite interesting. Angeline from Indiana, 70 degrees and sunny. I think it sounds like today is an excellent day in most of the US. And Fountain Pen Teacher from Pennsylvania, where it is a cloudy 66 degrees. Well, even if it's cloudy, 66 degrees is still quite nice. And Jason, yes, of course, 72 here in Maryland. I feel like that's a little bit warmer than it is over here at the Washington Monument. But I don't have a thermometer on me, so I can't confirm the exact temperature out here. All right. Alex is a plus 6 hours from DC tonight. Mark Finley, good to have you. Welcome. How are you doing, Mark? Haven't heard from you in a while. And April Nasworthy changed time 2 weeks ago. Thank you for reminding me. I could not remember. April's from Georgia. And Eddie, 75 in Raleigh. Might get storms later. Yeah, it might be a bit stormy here tomorrow. So tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., I will be doing a live stream in Cleveland Park, which is a neighborhood that is over in this direction, about 5 miles away. And that is where the National Cathedral is located. And they have some pretty spectacular blossoms. So gonna go up there, and we'll be joined by Carolyn from DC Design Tours, who has joined me on a few TripHacks DC videos before, so you may remember her. And she will basically be guiding me around Cleveland Park, because that is a neighborhood that I don't get to too often, and so I don't know a whole lot about it. But I know that it does have some pretty amazing blossoms, so I wanted to show you that the blossoms are more than just the ones down here by the tourist sites. They are all over the city. And Mark just got back from Hawaii. That is quite a trip. I bet that Hawaii is going to be a very popular destination this summer. Dale says, good farmers market in Cleveland Park. Is there anything in particular you like to get at the farmer's market, Dale? And is it one of those farmer's markets that is mostly produce, or is it one of those ones that has all kind of artisanal things at it as well? Whenever there's a baker at a farmer's market, I always wind up buying a loaf of bread. But sometimes it's just the produce, so curious about that. Eddie says, looks busy and the blossoms look amazing. Yeah, it is probably the busiest day I've seen around here, Eddie. A lot of people out enjoying a picnic lunch. Now, in case anyone missed it when I was describing it earlier, today would typically be, or this weekend rather, would be the weekend when we would have the National Cherry Blossom Festival, Kite Festival. Now, the Kite Festival is a combination of professional kite flyers and just regular folks out flying kites like these people are. Now, they canceled it this year. And so they said, we don't want to have everybody gathered here flying kites, but you're welcome to fly your own kite, take a video of yourself, post it on social media. And so that's what these folks are doing. So on a day like today, you would normally see 1,000 kites flying around. I don't know if that number is accurate, but many kites flying around. Today, far, far fewer, because they did not have it as an official event. But a few folks still did bring their kites. And Scott, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Very much appreciated. Where are you tuned in from in the world, Scott? Always curious to know where everyone is joining from. Alex says tomorrow's going to be 66 to 68 Fahrenheit in Rome. And thank you for converting that to Fahrenheit, because I'm terrible with the Celsius temperatures. Bryce, hello, welcome. Where are you tuned in from, Bryce? Dale, yes, I imagine it's probably one of those farmers markets that has a whole variety of things that you can get. So I don't know if it's my imagination, it might be, but I was over here this morning around 9 a.m. and I swear that these cherry trees were not as far along as they are right now. I took a picture so I can check once I'm finished with the stream, but it sure feels like in the 6 hours since I've been here that they're even more open than they were this morning. Oh, Scott says, just at the tidal basin 3 hours ago. What did you think? Have you been before? And if not, what did you think of your first time? Alex says the Fahrenheit and Celsius are not too complicated. Well, that's probably true. I'm just not very good at it. But I definitely visited these cherry trees over here, and I swear they were not as far along as they are right now. So they are progressing quite quickly. Mark says little buffering. Yeah, Mark, I'm a little uncertain about how strong my video cell signal is today, because there are so many people out here. My hunch is that there will probably be a bit of buffering. I think if you're watching it live, one trick that you can do is to adjust the video settings on YouTube so that it's not trying to pull it at full quality. But if you're okay with a little bit of buffering, then that's just what happens. Ruth says nice weather, watching from San Antonio, Texas. Scott lives in Maryland but did not visit last year because of COVID-19. Yeah, Scott, I'm exactly the same. Live nearby, give tours right around here all the time, and I did not see the blossoms at all in 2019, which was very, very sad, if I may say. I think 2020 was the first year that I did not see the blossoms at all. All right, yeah, send me a message, Simon, if you have a device that can help with the signal strength. When I was getting set up, I was looking at all the people who are out and about today and thinking, yeah, I bet I'm going to have some signal strength issues today with all these people out. Good question, Mark. I have not covered this. Do I expect tours to come back strong soon? You know, I have absolutely no idea about that. A few weeks ago, I had a whole bunch of emails about April tours, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to accept any because there was still a lot of uncertainty. So I asked everyone to hold tight, and then I sent everyone a message when I opened up tours a few days ago, and only one of them got booked. So I don't know if everybody got spooked by the National Cherry Blossom or the National Park Service announcement about closing the tidal basin, or they decided to come later, or what happened. But it's impossible to say because sometimes it feels like, yeah, it's going to come back strong, and then other times it feels like it's not. It's definitely going to be better than 2020, but anything's better than 2020 when we basically had no tours at all. When was the last time Trip Hacks DC gave a tour? I think the last time I gave a tour was about a month ago. I did give a tour in February. I can't remember exactly when. I gave a private tour in February. And tours are now open for booking for now through April 12th, I believe. Dave says, was thinking of visiting in September. Any thoughts on that time of year or too far in advance to speculate? So Dave, in general, I think September is an excellent time to come. You get the good weather. You get the post-summer crowds. It is a little bit more expensive to stay in a hotel in September than it is in, say, August, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth the premium. But as far as what's going to be open this September, it is too far in advance to speculate. All right, sounds like we have a protest group over here on Constitution Avenue. It wouldn't be a Saturday in Washington, D.C. without at least one protest group. If anyone recognizes their flags, let me know. Not entirely sure what that one is about. John asks, any idea when Smithsonian will reopen? No idea, John. If you rewind a little bit, I gave a longer explanation to this question, but basically Smithsonian does not make it easy for you to plan your trip because they reopen on very short notice, or at least they did last summer when they reopened some of the museums. Okay, good question, Jason. Will the Nats games have fans in attendance? Yes, they will. I believe opening day will have 5,000 fans in attendance. 5,000 is, I think, a little bit more than 10% of capacity. Capacity is around 40,000. So it will be more than last year. They did not have any fans in attendance last year, but it will be far shy of capacity. And of course, on opening day, you normally expect it to be a sold-out game. So they will reevaluate the attendance later, but yes, Nats games will have fans in attendance, even if not sellout crowds. Good question, Dale. How is the work on the Jefferson Memorial? I will take you over to the Washington Monument, and we will take a look together and see how the work on the Jefferson Memorial is going. The last time I was there, which was a few weeks ago, they still had some scaffolding up, but the roof was looking good, and it looked like it was less under construction than it was last year. Okay, how is the parking situation if we want to drive to the area? Now, are you asking in general, or are you asking for cherry blossoms? Because that's two different answers. So if you could clarify your parking question, I can give you a better answer. Chandler asks, is it safe down there? Yes, of course it's safe. Look at all these people out and about. It is perfectly safe. Okay, parking right now for the cherry blossoms. So the best advice I can give you is to not attempt to drive to the cherry blossoms. Even in the before times, the traffic was a nightmare and parking was a mess. And now, with everything else, they have some of the parking areas closed. So the paddle boats parking lot, I believe, is closed. And Ohio Drive is closed to traffic, and the parking areas over there are closed as well. So I highly, highly, highly do not recommend driving to the area for the cherry blossoms now or before or after. But if you must, try to park in a garage. I have a video about parking garages that you may find. The front doors, yes, they did. It was, I think, in January that they went back to regular operation. So you go through the front door and pay at the front. And where's the best place to see cherry blossoms? Well, if you ask a local, they often will say that the best place to see the cherry blossoms is in your own neighborhood. So if you go down in the video description, you'll see I put a map of every cherry tree in the city, and they are everywhere. So if you're lucky to live near some cherry trees, the best place to see them is where you live. Okay, Alex asks, masks are obligatory outdoors? Yes, I think. Masks are required on all federal properties, including national parks, yes. How do people get here? By public transportation? People get here by all means. Public transportation, biking, walking. I got here today by riding on my bike, and I locked it up over near the African American History and Culture Museum where I started the stream. Yes, Alex, I'm not going to be the mask police, but I'm just telling you what the rules are. And I am not going to police what other people do. TJ Driver, yes. Front boarding, yes. Thank you for clarifying that. If you do ride the bus, back to regular bus operation. I have been mostly walking and biking everywhere. So I have ridden the bus a few times. I have ridden the metro, but I mostly walk and bike. I may make a video about things I do differently post-COVID, and one of them will be how I get around. I used to look at the distance between point A and point B and just try to figure out the and okay, Jason asks about the metro to Dulles. This is a touchy subject, I will admit. Metro to Dulles has been in the works for a long, long time. It was originally supposed to open a few years ago, and then last year, and then this year, now next year. So at this point, it'll be open when it's open. I would not trust any projected opening date for the Dulles Metro because we have been burned many, many times believing those dates. All right, Dale, so I'll go up the hill over here and hopefully you'll be able to see. So not sure if it's very obvious from way back here, but the scaffolding is still up around the Jefferson Memorial off in the distance over there. The roof is quite clean. Hopefully you can tell how nice and squeaky clean the roof is. Now if you came in the past few years, you might have remembered that the roof appeared to look dirty and then there was one strip of white on the top. It wasn't actually dirt, it was biofilm, a living organism, and the National Park Service had tested a few different means of getting rid of it. That's why they had this single strip running down the side that looked like they had cleaned it off. But they have finally gone ahead and done the entire thing, so now it is a bright white stone on the top of the monument. There was a question about whether biofilm was actually bad. Some people thought the biofilm might actually be protecting the stone underneath it. And so the question was, should we even get rid of it? But for the Jefferson Memorial, they decided to go ahead and do it. All right, Mark asks, is the circulator still free? That was nice when we were there. I don't think the circulator is still free. When they restarted front door boarding, I believe that they went back to the $1 circulator fare. But that is a very good question. So the history of the circulator fare is that a few years ago, the mayor declared that circulator was free and you didn't have to pay to ride. And that was surprising, I think, to some people because, why free? But turns out that especially a lot of visitors really liked having circulator free. It was very convenient. And then during COVID, all buses were free, circulator and Metro bus. And the reason for that is because they wanted the driver to be away from the passengers. And so since you couldn't go and enter the bus through the front door, you couldn't pay because that's where the pay box is. And so during COVID, circulator and Metro bus were free because you entered through the back door. And then in January, they switched back to regular payment. So I believe that circulator is back to its standard $1 fare, which is still a bargain. I will say is still a bargain. And a trip hack that I don't think I've advertised in any videos yet is that if you have a Smart Trip card, it's technically $1 for unlimited rides in like a 2.5 or 3 hour period, because after you ride, if you ride again, it's counted as a transfer, and those do not cost extra. So, circulator, even if it is $1, still the best deal in town. All right, Dale, I don't know if you're still on, but hopefully you were able to see the progress on the Jefferson Memorial there. So I'm going to go back around the Washington Monument to the other side and wrap up more or less where I started. Okay, Aaron, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, confirms that is how the public transit was where they live. It was free. Yes, does look better than Thanksgiving 2019. Jason asks, are the bus tours worth the cost? I think you're asking about the big bus tour. So obviously they are my competition, so I'm always going to say that I think a walking tour, especially a TripX DC walking tour, is a superior option. But I think that in some situations it can be okay, but for most people I think you will have a better experience on a walking tour than on a bus tour, just because the sites in Washington DC are not necessarily accessible by bus the way that they are by foot. So you wind up, even if you do a bus tour, if it's one of those nighttime bus tours where the tour guide gets off at every stop with you, you wind up spending a lot of time walking to and from the bus and then to and from the sites. And so I feel like it's less efficient than you would assume it would be. So just to give you a sense, when I travel, when I go on my own vacation, I take a ton of tours. I love taking tours, but they're almost always walking tours. They're almost never bus tours because that's just not my cup of tea. Not to say that it's not for everybody, but I'm not going to tell you that it's terrible and then it turns out that's all I do when I travel. No, when I travel, I take almost exclusively walking tours. Yes, Simon confirms, 3-hour travel window. So if you use a Smart Trip and you ride the circulator, you basically get as many rides as you want for $1 within a 3-hour window, which is not advertised, but can be a good trip hack. Eddie still has a limited edition Cherry Blossom Smart Trip card from a few years back. Yeah, I love the novelty Smart Trip cards. They're pretty cool. I have a Washington Nationals novelty Smart Trip card. I really wanted to get the World Series one, but I failed to acquire that. The problem I have with the novelty Smart Trip cards is you can, well, if you live here, you typically register your Smart Trip card and put all your money on one card. So it's not like you're going to be carrying around a bunch of different novelty Smart Trip cards. You typically pick your favorite and use that. But it is a collector's item, yes. I bet you can go on eBay and find people selling some of the vintage Smart Trip cards. Not saying that they're selling them for $1,000, but I bet there's a demand for them. Yeah, Joseph says, like the freedom of a walking tour, being able to stop and soak it in. Yeah, that's the other thing about the bus tour is, especially if it's the one where the tour guide gets off because there's 30 other people or 50 other people in the tour group, you basically only get so much time before you have to leave because the group has to stay on a schedule. A dozen people or less, because that way we can kind of do a pace that's good for the small group, whereas when you have 50 people in the group, you're never going to be able to keep a pace that everybody's happy with. Yeah, it's not my cup of tea, I will admit. So Jason says, comparing DC to London, everything seems relatively close over there, I guess you mean here, whereas London sites are dotted all over the city. I think it depends, Jason. A lot of sites are here, right here where I am on the National Mall, so that includes the monuments and the museums. But for example, the zoo is 4 miles away, so that's not right nearby. And you have a few things that are like a mile uptown. Mile's not a lot. I've been to London. I don't really recall feeling like things were really spread out. But it's all about perception. Ken says you won't hate them when you're 73. I think he means bus tours. Yeah, so it's not bad for everybody. That's why I don't want to say it's universally bad. But you have to kind of evaluate your own personal traveling style. And if it's something that you're into, it could be great. If it's something you're not into, it might not be great. I'd say don't feel like you should do it because you feel like it's there. Like when you go to a lot of cities, the big bus, the double-decker bus, is like literally the first thing you see. And so you see all these people on it and you're like, oh, that must be the thing to do. I don't think that that's necessarily the way to approach it. But if you're doing your research about your trip and you feel like it would be a good way to get around to see the sights, then yeah, go for it. Alex agrees that London is large and dispersed like Rome. I have not been to Rome, but I have been to London. And I am a fan, I will say. Now for transportation, I will say that the circulator bus I do recommend because it goes, at least the National Mall route, goes to most of the sites. It's super cheap. You know, like the tourist bus, that might be, you might have to pay $40 for a ticket. Whereas the circulator bus, it's like $1 a ride. So if all you care about is transportation, the circulator is excellent. Simon says London and DC are very good walking cities. I agree. I love a good walking city. And I would put a lot of big cities into that categorization. Whenever I go to New York City, I try to walk all over the place. I know a lot of people, when they go to New York City, they're all about the subway, especially if it's the first time they've ever ridden a big city subway like that. But I personally try to walk everywhere because there's no better way to soak it in than just walking around versus traveling in a tube underground. Well, Jason, hopefully you do book a TripX DC tour when you visit, and also a bus tour. There's no shame in trying both. Oh, and Dale says the Beatles bus tour in Liverpool is worth it. Now that is a case where a bus tour probably is worth it. It really depends on what the sites are that you're trying to see. So I don't know much about the Beatles, but it does sound like their sites are fairly spaced apart. Now, if you were to do a brewery tour, for example, in DC, the breweries are all over the place, and they're not close to each other, really. So a bus tour is probably the best way to get around to them, plus you have your own driver. All right, Mark stayed way out in Fairfax and used the metro to get into town, no regrets. I have 11 areas where I recommend to stay, but that's not to say that other areas aren't good too.
The picture Emily took of us yesterday too was cute. Yeah, it was cute.
Eddie says, on a bus tour, the guide fell asleep. I'll have to dig out the picture of him snoring. I sure hope that the guide was not the same as the driver. I assume they were different people. But if your tour guide falls asleep, that is a sign that it is not a good tour. Ah, hello, Hiro from Japan, welcome. Hiro, what do you think of the Washington, D.C. cherry trees? I think you're my first guest from Japan on a live stream in a long time. Eddie says he got no tip. I typically think you should tip your tour guide, but if your tour guide falls asleep on the job, that is definitely a no-tip situation. All right, we're all anxiously awaiting Hiro to give an opinion about what they think about the Washington, D.C. cherry trees. And also, I'm curious to know what time of day it is where you live in Japan.
Somebody did something yesterday, man.
Yes, Mark Finley says that the metro does start in Fairfax, so you don't have to fight for a seat. That is true. And Hiro, love it, want to see it. Well, I am glad to hear that. Of course, the history of the Washington, D.C. cherry trees goes back to a little over 100 years ago. The cherry trees are a gift from Japan. The first batch of cherry trees did not make it. They arrived and they were diseased when they got here. But we're very fortunate that, I believe it was the mayor of Tokyo, was generous enough to send a second shipment of trees. And the second shipment did arrive, and all was good from there. Jason asks, what is that music in the background? It is a guy playing a drum. I passed him at the very beginning, so after this is over, if you go back to, if you rewind back to like 5 minutes into the live stream, you'll be able to see that guy. But it was very loud when I walked past, and I had to stop and couldn't talk until I got past him. Sounds like steel drums. Possibly. I do not know enough about percussion instruments to know what type of drum. But Mark, if you rewind to, I don't know, about 5 minutes into the live stream, you'll be able to see what they look like.
Could you imagine biking in New York City?
Okay, so I have made it back to the African American History and Culture Museum, which if you were here from the beginning, you remember this is the spot where I started. And so we got a chance to do a full loop of the Washington Monument today and see all of those cherry trees that are around, the early bloomers. If you would like to see it again, you can rewind, watch from the beginning in case you missed it. Eddie Saunders, thank you for the super chat, very much appreciated. And if you haven't already, make sure to give this video a thumbs up so that I know that you liked it and that you had fun. And remember that tomorrow, Sunday, March 28th at 11 a.m., I will be back here live. I'm doing neighborhood cherry blossoms in the Cleveland Park neighborhood with Carolyn from DC Design Tours. So she will be guiding me around, and I'll be able to show you even more cherry trees, not just the ones here on the National Mall. So make sure to tune in at 11 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow, Sunday. I know tomorrow's a holiday, so not everyone will be able to join, but it will be up. These live walks are all up and available to watch after the fact, so you're welcome to do that. And remember, give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already. Otherwise, I will say goodbye. See you tomorrow. Thanks for joining Jason, Alex, Mark Finley, of course, Eddie Saunders. Always good to see you. And Hiro, thank you for tuning in from Japan, and everyone else who I haven't gotten a chance to recognize. Kathy Woods, thank you for tuning in and for joining. And with that, as I always say, enjoy.